Okay, welcome everybody to the September 26th, 2023 meeting of the Board of Health. It's about 7 p.m. In accordance with the governor's order superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law 30A, Section 20, related to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency. The September 26th meeting at 7 p.m. of the Board of Health shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. And alternative public access to this meeting shall be utilizing Zoom virtual meeting software, and the link is on the town's website. And I think we can dispense of that. Anything else? We have no public hearings tonight, and unless anything's come in since you wrote this. Okay. And then, so I think the first thing is we have an appointment with Kathy Fox regarding the Emmanuel Baptist Church Bible Study Coffee Hour. And just for the board's benefit, I spoke with Kathy a couple weeks ago, and I said that this is not a discussion that I can make a decision on. The board has to do it, so that's why she wrote the letter. So I will turn the floor over to her unless Betsy has anything to add with the submission that, and then. So, and I know that there's going to be some questions, and I know that John will have something to add, but I'm thinking just let Kathy make her presentation, and then the board can ask questions. I will ask questions last because I kind of know where Kathy's going with this, but I let the rest of the board talk, and then if I have anything to sort of add, then I'll do so, and then I'll turn it over to John if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yep.
Kathy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I guess the main thing, I mean, you have the information that I wrote in the letter, and I think the main thing is that when we bring refreshments to share at a meeting, I believe that comes under the potluck ruling, and which exempts us from local Board of Health, the Board of Health regulations, and the main thing, from what John told me, he said that a potluck event would have to be separate from the use of the kitchen. And I can't find anywhere in the law that it says that. And I don't understand why that would be, that we couldn't use the kitchen during these times. So that's my question. What is the reasoning behind it? I just, it doesn't make sense to me.
Liz and Chrissy, do you have questions, or do you have any? And I can kind of fill in some of the discussion I had with Kathy, but Liz and Chrissy, go ahead. If you've got questions, go ahead, ask.
I mean, I think I'll have questions maybe after hearing John's response, because I don't think I truly understand either. So.
Okay.
Same. I didn't see. I looked in the regulation that she sent, or the potluck advisory. It didn't mention anything about being in a kitchen or near a kitchen or anything. So I wasn't clear on the rules myself.
Okay. I've spent some time looking at the regulations, and I know based on the previous issues we had up at the Federated Church. And Kathy, I think that the bottom line is John is, he's not necessarily saying you can't use the kitchen. You just can't use the kitchen to prepare food or drinks or coffee. So essentially everything has to come in. So I think we're not trying to split hairs. I think we're just trying to be consistent by if you want to use the kitchen to make coffee, that's fine. You can use the kitchen if you're laying stuff out. And I'm gonna hope that people do clean up after themselves and that the kitchen is cleaned periodically. I have to admit, I've lived in Norfolk over 30 years and I've never been in that church once. So I'm going to claim complete ignorance on what the interior is like. But having been, at two of the other churches for scouting events and stuff like that, the kitchens are kept up clean. So I'm going to assume that that's the case. But just to clarify, what John is really saying is that you can't use the kitchen to prepare food, whether that's coffee or whether it's drink or it's or it's food. So that's essentially that division. if you want to use the kitchen for laying things out and stuff like that, if you've got an area that's perfect for, unwrapping things and putting it on plates and stuff like that, I think that's fine. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the preparation of food, whether you're cutting stuff, whether you're actually mixing stuff, whether you're baking stuff, whether you're bringing ingredients in and preparing it. And the same thing with the coffee. It's a coffee urn. I just remember my grandmother's coffee urn that she had probably for 40 years, and the thing was pretty well kept and pretty well used. But again, is there a risk of carrying bacteria in there? Again, I can't say what was that 50 years ago when she still was alive. But at the same time, we're trying to be consistent and using the logic of you shouldn't be preparing food in the kitchen, and that's it. There are ways to use the kitchen, which would be getting the the food preparation certification, which really is not a big deal. But I think from your perspective, if you're making coffee there, could somebody make that elsewhere? There's other means of bringing the big insulated canteens into the that can handle hot food or hot drinks into the function when you're having it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I think John needs to stop me and sort of fill in where I've maybe have glossed over some of the details. So.
I'm happy to jump in. I think Christy had her hand up. Did you want to speak before I get started, or?
No, that's fine. I didn't. It sounded like Andy was answering for you, so I wasn't sure if you were going to speak. So I was going to ask my question, but if you're still going to speak, I'll wait. Sorry.
Sure. So my position on this is that the church can have a potluck, and the church has a permit and should have a permit, but you can't mix the two items. That's the only place I'm coming from. So if the kitchen has a permit and to have their coffee hour, to have events that are open to the public, then you can't mix food from a residential kitchen with permitted food, because a food establishment can only have food from approved sources. If you want to have a potluck, you can have a potluck, but you can't mix residential kitchen food with food coming out of the permitted kitchen. And so that's my position on this. This started with a bigger conversation about a larger event. When the whole discussion started, I think 5 or 6 months ago, and came down to the Bible study question in the last couple of weeks. I think if this was a private meeting or held in somebody's home, I would have no comment on it at all. But where the Bible study is open to the public and there's a permitted kitchen, you just can't mix the two. You can't do homemade food with permitted food. So my position is you can make a coffee cake in the kitchen under your permit. You can buy a coffee cake at the store and slice it up in the kitchen under your permit. But if you want to do homemade food, then you need to bring in coffee from the outside. And that's, I feel like it's a very fine point because we're talking about, in this instance, we're talking about a Bible study. There's probably a small group that's open to the public. But I'm just trying to be consistent along with the bigger events where several people come into the church hall and have a meal together. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't know if I've made that clear or more muddy, or if I can answer any questions.
So the only food being prepared is the coffee. If the coffee wasn't there's no actual food, it's just coffee that we're referring to as food. Is that right?
So the permit is about, I think, essentially and it started before me, but I believe that the permit itself was about coffee hour. So where they had coffee and cream and milk and food that they were cutting and plating, as Andy was speaking to earlier, that if that's open to the public, that should all occur under a permit. And that should not be.
I'm just talking about this specific thing that they're talking about, the potluck.
Yeah.
For this event. They want to bring food from home. The only thing they want to prepare in the kitchen is coffee, but that's not allowed if they bring food from home. Coffee is what's considered food.
Right, the coffee, right, and the TCS foods that would go with it, which essentially is going to be milk or cream. Right. That would seem like that's all it is if we're talking about just the Bible study. That's my belief. Is that correct, Kathy? Do I understand that?
I really, it's again, I don't understand it, because of course we use the coffee. I mean, we use the equipment in the kitchen, but it's all, why is the kitchen, because it's licensed, why, if for an event it doesn't come under the local board of health, why are you taking the kitchen out? I mean, we go by, we have gloves when we're handling food. You know, we have certain ways that the equipment has to be cleaned. Food can't be left in the refrigerator beyond a certain date. Anything that's left there has to be labeled. I mean, we follow all the necessary things as far as the procedure goes, you know, good health, but it doesn't, I can't find a law that says because we bring food to share. I mean, some of it could be store-bought food, but I guess I just had to question what was happening when I was told that the ladies coming to my study could no longer bring homemade food. I mean, sometimes homemade things are better than purchased items, are healthier than purchased items. So it doesn't make sense to me that because someone chooses to bring something from home to a meeting that we can't use the kitchen to make coffee. I can't find a law that would, you know, that would govern that.
So sorry, through Andy, if you want me to respond.
Yeah, John, I think that some additional help with the regulations would probably be helpful. And Kathy, and John, if I can just take a quick detour here, and Kathy and I spoke about you know, the how things have changed with COVID and all that type of stuff, and you know, I know things still have changed as well, and you know, the fact that bringing baked goods into a hospital setting where my wife works is very difficult these days, and actually it's not allowed. It's simply just not allowed, and things have changed. It's like, what has changed? Well, the way we interact with people, and the fact that there could be some sort of bacterial or viral contamination. Some of this stuff you just don't know. And I, Kathy, I'd ask from the perspective of understand that things have changed and things aren't going back to what we used to do 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's unfortunate, and believe me, I sympathize because there's a lot of things I've been dealing with over the past 3 or 4 years as well, that things have changed. You just can't do that. There's things you just can't do anymore because it's, you know, whether someone is going to get exposed to something, it's just sort of the new normal. And I know that's not, there's nothing in a regulation anywhere I've ever found that says the new normal is, and then they list all the regulations. But from the perspective of what you're doing, everything you're saying, I believe, is correct. It's complete, but the way the regulatory people put this stuff together and the way they look at it is they try to make it as defined as possible. And I think in your case, it's probably making it more confusing because it's not clear. And I will admit it's not as clear as it could be. So, but John, I'll turn the floor over to you. If you can provide the regulations for Kathy, that would be helpful. The regulatory sites, that would be the next step, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm going. So to be clear, I have no problem with a potluck occurring, right? And I have no problem with the permit. It's just mixing the two is where I'm. You know, my position is technical, right? And so I'm, for the sake of consistency, I'm just going strictly by the code on this. So I'm taking the position of, that having a food permit under the food code, under the merged food code, which I'm happy to share with Kathy. So 590, 000. That's where I'm saying, like, it's a food establishment when it's open to the public and food's prepared in that facility. Food, coffee, TCS foods, when it's prepared in that facility. A potluck can occur if it falls under the potluck rules, and the Board of Health would have no say on it, other than to have the sign posted, which I don't think Kathy has an issue with, but that you can't mix the two. You can't take food from a residential kitchen, go into the kitchen, cut it and plate it, and serve it alongside, with plates and dishes that are supposed to be clean and sanitized under the food permit, and serve it alongside other food or, coffee or things that are handled under the permit. You just can't mix the two at the same time. It's, so my position is it's one or the other, but again, I'm happy to provide the link to the code.
So this kitchen is used for more than just this potluck. Is that what you're saying? And it's permitted for other use? So she can't use the facilities? Is that what you're saying?
So my understanding is that the kitchen's used for Sunday coffee hours. It's occasionally used for collations. It's been used for where this discussion came from. There was I believe it was a retirement party. And that's when I started talking with the people at the church about, in that case, and I don't remember all the details, but in that case, they were using the permitted kitchen and bringing in food from residential kitchens or desserts from people's homes and serving it to a larger crowd. And that's where the conversation started. And then I think that was passed on to the hospitality committee and then passed on to Kathy and maybe other members of the church. So,
I think I see your confusion in this because it says neither the food nor the facilities have been inspected by the state. But because you're saying it has been inspected by the state, that's the issue?
I'm saying because it's a permitted facility. Yeah.
So could the coffee be made not in the kitchen and then used with that feels like we're just being crazy for crazy's sake,
For sure.
They could do that though, as long as it's not in the kitchen.
So we could go, what you're saying, okay, so we don't make it in the kitchen. We bring in a coffee pot. We go to the ladies' room and get water from the sink. And this is going to be much better than using a clean kitchen. It doesn't.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
That's why
And so, I'm just trying to understand what, the fear is that the contamination that could come from someone's prepared food at home could then, infect the kitchen. But if they brought from store food that you don't know how it's been stored and handled in between getting from the store and getting to the facility, that could also happen, but that would be allowed, just not from their home.
Right, for sure. They could bring food from the store and not store it properly and mishandle it. That's true, and that's part of why when we inspect and when we permit things, we go through what the food code is and talk about food safety and things like that. In the past, the grocery store wasn't considered an approved source, and there's been some loosening on that. So that's why I say bring something in from the store. Everything has a level of risk to it. It is controlling the amount of risk. There's no way to guarantee that something is 100% safe or unsafe. I think one other point I would make is, or I guess 2 points. One, the potluck advisory is not a blanket exemption for charitable organizations. It doesn't allow an organization to just do what they want. And the food code doesn't talk about whether a food establishment makes money or takes money. It's about serving food to a consumer or for human consumption. And then, if we start mixing the potluck regulation along with permits, why would we continue to permit other organizations like the Lions, right? The Lions pull permits for temporary events. the food pantry that occurs at the same church has to pull a permit because they have refrigerated foods. They can't take those foods home. They can't take donations of food from home kitchens, even though they're a charity, even though they're well-intentioned. We still need to make sure that that food is secure and safe. So I mean, I'm not trying to eliminate Kathy's coffee cake. I'm not trying to make it harder for the church to get together. I'm just trying to be consistent in enforcement of the food code and the permits.
So I guess my question would just come back to who Kathy spoke to at the state level, who referenced that it's your interpretation of
Absolutely.
what this law is. How do the neighboring towns, like, that's kind of, if it's a state code, why isn't there like a state guideline on the interpretation? Like, that seems to put you in a really unfair position.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So, you know, and I agree with the state's assessment. It is my interpretation of the code, and it's my interpretation based on my training and experience, why I'm saying that. And I'll add that in other towns, I permit churches the same way.
Well, I guess I don't mean you, because you would interpret it the
sure.
same way every town you work with.
Right.
More like other people with your same role. How do they interpret? I'm sorry, that wasn't clear.
Yeah, no, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths. I try to speak 100% from my position,
Yeah.
but I have had this discussion with other colleagues. Can you mix using that permitted kitchen with food from people's kitchens? And there's no one here to back me up on this, but they all say that everyone I've talked to about it has said the same thing. Like, no, it's a permit, and you can do a potluck, or you can have the permit. You can't do both. And so that's why I interpret it the way I do, based on those conversations of my experience. But still, it is my interpretation. I don't think there's a clear black and white answer in either the food code or the potluck advisory that Kathy has provided. And so that's why I come down the way I do on this. Sorry, I'm trying to answer your question on that, but.
Well, Christy, I can, your concerns about the consistency and interpretation of regulations, believe me, I mean, given the work I've done for 45 years, it's any given Monday, it'll come across in a different way just because there's other information available. And I'm just going to say from my perspective of, with all the issues we've had with the same topic over the past couple of months, this is not new territory for the state, but I think it's new territory for Norfolk because we haven't had anybody like John who's being in the position he's in. And I think John is trying to be consistent across the board rather than try to put the hammer down on people. And I understand that. And I also look at it from the perspective of having a wife who's in the medical field and understanding how protection of human health and by having gatherings, and if there's food in there, it's part of the new normal. And I don't know if
Sure. I mean, I work in events and in gatherings and with food. So, I mean, I don't have no perspective for it. I don't know if I can then have my own interpretation of it as well. That's really just where my questions are coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is a little bit of uncharted territory for all of us because, up until one of the last meetings when we had the regulations on the potluck were brought up, I had no idea they even existed. So yeah, so it's new territory. I mean, I think Kathy is probably looking for some sort of resolution at this point, and I think having her and John get together again and probably sort of laying things out and where things are, and if there's a request for a variance to the Board of Health, and that would have to be, that would have to come back through another meeting. But I think that's probably inevitable at this point. But I think that they can probably work it out without too much trouble. Kathy, I want to say I think John has your being able for you to keep the organization running and the events still going. I think that's John's intent, but I think trying to be consistent in how the regulations are interpreted and how they apply to your event. That's what we need to do. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just curious of other churches in the state, how many of them are under such strict guidelines. It seems to me to be overreaching. And the reason I'm coming to you as a Board of Health is because, the state person told me that the state does not regulate the local Board of Health. It's up to them. So I was just coming to you, hoping that you'd have some common sense in the situation. And as far as contamination, I mean, people can bring store-bought foods, and the way they're handled, they can be contaminated. And
that's exactly what I told you when we talked on the phone, saying that you're seeing salmonella and listeria and all kinds of E. coli on lettuce and other store-bought products, and that's completely understandable. I mean, that's where we are. But again, this is comparing what other towns, other churches across the Commonwealth are doing. There's got to be some sort of regulations in place. There's got to be some sort of, I'll call it, guidelines in place that are actually governing this work. Again, if these towns and small, I'll say the smaller towns out in the middle part of the state don't have an inspector like John, what are they doing? I have no idea, and I'm quite sure John doesn't know. But I mean, he's actually working in other communities right around here too. So I think he's got a good sense of what's going on. But I understand. I understand completely what you're saying, that the consistency has to be there. John, I'm not sure if you can add whether if there's some sort of certification that Kathy's group can get, some sort of like the safe food certifications would help this matter. I don't know if you can make a recommendation. That's something that maybe a workaround or basically have to be included. I don't know.
I'd be happy to try and help with that. I think it comes down to food in a residential kitchen can't be brought in with a permit. So the only certification I can think of for somebody to make food at their house and add it to something that's permitted for the public would be a wholesale residential kitchen permit through the state. And I think that's certainly an option. We have residential kitchens with the state permit in Norfolk. But that I feel like that would, I feel like me requiring that would be a bar too high as well. It's an option. But
I thought a residential kitchen permit was only required if you were selling the items.
Correct. Right. So there's a residential kitchen permit, like a retail residential kitchen permit, which is for the people who bake at home and sell at farmers markets in town. And then there's a wholesale residential kitchen permit through the state that allows people to bake non-TCS foods in their homes and sell it to food establishments.
They're not selling anything.
Yeah, but if they're not selling it, that's just my question is, they would need that residential permit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So that's what the permits allow, is for selling of it. But my point earlier was about, if you have a permit, you can only get food from approved sources. So you couldn't take food in from a residential kitchen or a retail residential kitchen, but you could take food in from a wholesale residential kitchen. That's whether you pay for it or not.
I gotta step away. Sorry, guys. I think my dogs are getting into an opossum again. I can hear them.
All right. Is there a town attorney? Does a town have an attorney?
I don't know if Betsy can answer that.
The town does have an attorney, but I don't think they have any jurisdiction over this matter.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we've got to confirm kill. I'm sorry.
Oh no, Andy.
Okay. All right. I mean, I don't know what I can say. If the board agrees with, you've hired John and you go with what he says, I don't know what I can say. If it's, except that I think it's overreaching, and I may take this up with other organizations to see. I don't know. As I said, I wrote the letter. I came to you hoping that maybe there'd be some common sense here. I still don't see. I still don't say it's. I don't see the separation of the kitchen from what it says it doesn't come in. This such an event is exempt from the local Board of Health rules. It doesn't make sense to me. I think this is the purpose that that ruling was made, when it was made, but I'll have to investigate further. I still haven't seen the rule that says that it's separate, but I have to believe. I mean, I know John knows what he's talking about, but it's overreaching to me.
Sometimes regulations are overreaching, but John can provide that information to you, I'm sure.
Okay, I'll be looking for it.
Okay. Yep, I can give you the link to the code.
Where you've been sitting there, do you have questions? Or are you
Can't hear.
Oops.
I guess you can't hear me.
Oh, I can now. Okay.
We
Okay.
hear now.
Where
Okay.
you've been sitting there patiently, do you have questions or are you just listening in? You're on mute.
Oh yeah, I'm just observing. Is that
Okay.
all right? I'm
Oh.
interested in how it. I'm just interested in watching.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
No business. Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
that's what you're saying for the Board of Health, that we cannot bring in home baked food and still use the kitchen.
That's the interpretation, and I guess where this would go is that if the Board of Health agrees with John's assessment, or if there wants to be discussion about some alternative workaround, that's possible too. But at the same time, if the board supports John's decision, you then appeal it, and then comes back to the board. You'd have to do homework to justify that it's either a burden, it's overbearing, it violates something, or it's a misinterpretation of the law, and then decisions there whether we keep it or keep the decision that we have to follow John's suggestions, or that you take it higher to the state. I mean, I think you may have been a little bit misinformed that, yes, I mean, if you disagree with the Board of Health, I mean, there are means higher up in the state to go. So that wasn't, that's not quite correct what you were.
Yeah, that was the person who's in charge of the food court, the food code, that told me that the state did not have jurisdiction over the local boards.
I mean, every single town board can be overturned, whether it's by a higher state authority.
Okay.
That I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think we can move on.
Okay. Betsy, my other screen is not coming up right now. What's the next agenda item?
Just meeting minutes, but are we all set with John for?
Oh, I'm sorry.
John's got another meeting. If we're all set with him, are we okay to let him go?
I think so, unless the board wants to talk about this more, or do you want to think about it and then? I don't. You know, I know we have a difficult matter here to deal with because it just doesn't affect one organization in town. So, but if the board has any other thoughts or any additional things they want to talk about with it related to this, we can, or we can think about it and then put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Can we think about it? Can John send the link he was going to send to her, to everyone? Yep. Sorry.
Yep.
Just so I can further educate myself.
Everybody's got the barking dogs tonight.
It's a busy night for animals.
Yeah. And we have one less possum in the yard now.
Oh my gosh. Poor thing.
Anyways.
Oh.
Okay. John, I guess you're free to head off.
All right. Well,
Okay,
thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night, John.
Good night. Thanks.
So the meeting minutes, I think only Liz and I can vote on those because Chrissy, you weren't at the last meeting. If that's.
I have a question though about information. Am I allowed to ask a question?
Of course.
Oh, it just talks about that you appointed the following Board of Health terms to expire on 6/30/23. So I don't know if that should be 24.
Oh, actually, that should be 20. Sorry, that should be actually 26. We did 3-year terms. So that was just a typo. So thank you for catching that. Was that the only comment on the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get
Yeah, if Andy or Liz wanted to make that motion with that subject to that, making that change in the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as corrected.
Okay. Second. And all in favor say aye, or Andy Vakanowski, aye.
Liz Gephardt, aye.
Okay.
So we already heard from John. Matt is not available tonight. Andy, you and Matt are still working on those, right?
Yeah, the regs
on the well regulations.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and I guess Chrissy, this started before you came on the board. Just an FYI that in January, February of this year, the Mass DEP came out with new regulations for testing water for private wells, and the big emphasis is PFAS in the water. Unfortunately, the recommended testing omitted quite a few other parameters that are pretty common in Norfolk water or have been found, like volatile compounds and some metals and a few other things. So it was a little bit of a it was done more as a model bylaw, but obviously we have to fill things in, so we kind of have to backfill some of this stuff back in. We already test for that anyways. So, but it's PFAS is the contaminant of the decade. So there's a lot of interest, as well as there's a push to make sure that people cover it. So, okay, so that's what was going on. Okay. So, okay.
So at some point we'll have draft regulations, amendments to our regulations available. So, but not tonight.
Next item. Sorry, my screen just won't come up right now.
It's okay. So just wanted to let you all know that our annual flu clinic is being held on Wednesday, October 4th. from 11 to 1 and 2 to 4 at the Norfolk Senior Center, which is located at 28 Medway Branch Road. And I have also, we have a sign-up link that is included in your agenda, which has also been posted on the town website, so people can sign up there.
Betsy, should we put that on the community webpage as well?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I think it went out. Yes, I'll check. I thought it was posted, but
Yeah, I don't. There's been a lot of other things on that I think it might have gotten lost. Maybe it was.
Yeah. No, I'm actually out of the office until Monday. Actually, you know what? I can do that tomorrow.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll take care of it. Yes.
Yeah. Just check if it's there, because I have to admit I looked and I didn't see it, so that's why I'm asking.
Yep, that's okay. I can. I know it's on the town Facebook page. I can also share it on to the
Okay.
Norfolk community page.
Okay.
And then Southwood Hospital, I just wanted to let you all know that October 10th planning board meeting, MAPC is coming in to do a presentation on the Southwood Hospital redevelopment. If anybody's interested, that's hybrid, so you can always hop on Zoom if you wanted to watch that, or it's live streamed on NCTV, or you can go and watch the YouTube video after the fact. So that might be interesting. And that was it on that subject, unless you have anything, Andy?
There was a report that was submitted August 22nd, I believe, or 21st. And I'll be honest with you, I skimmed the test results. Nothing has really changed in 20 years, other than some of the oil that's in the ground has moved around. The PFAS that was found associated with some of the dumping on site. Additional assessment has to be done, and I know that the developers are putting a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission to put additional monitoring wells in. So,
their meeting is on October 11th. They did file a notice of intent.
Yeah, so things are still ongoing on this location. But that's it.
And then just anything, I don't know if there's anything on Buckley Man.
Okay, and I guess we can setting the schedule for the rest of the year.
Yep. Next, I've got our next scheduled meeting is October 24th, if that works for everyone.
Yep.
I just have a question about, it seems that John and Matt can often not make the meetings because they have competing meetings. Is it because we meet on a Tuesday or do they just not attend?
Unless there's any, Matt was away. So, I mean, John was here tonight, but Matt was not available tonight. He was actually off this evening. So.
Okay. I just didn't, I've never seen Matt on a call. So I didn't know if it was a specific that he can never make Tuesdays. So, but that was my only question.
Yeah, no, I don't think it conflicts. Matt works also in Rentham, but I don't think our meeting conflicts with Rentham.
Okay. And then last thing is any new business?
I have nothing else. Unless anybody.
Was you all set?
Sorry, I don't have anything. I was muted because of the stupid dog. And the loud child. I don't have anything.
Okay. Christy, all set?
Yeah.
Okay. Claire, any questions?
No, thank you for letting me observe. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
No problem. So I guess I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:45. p.m.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Andy Bakanowski, aye.
Liz Gephardt, aye.
Christy Burns, aye.
Okay. Okay.